If you're an American, you've probably heard this one before. Capitalism means freedom. With the liberty of the free market, the thinking goes, individuals are empowered to make their own decisions. Sounds good, right?
Yes, it absolutely does. But before we get into this, let's make sure we understand what is meant by capitalism and by freedom. Capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of capital goods. In a capitalist or market economy, individuals decide for themselves what they will do with what belongs to them, free of external coercion, as opposed to a command economy where central planners make those decisions for everyone. However, most economies today, to include the American economy, are in fact mixed economies, neither completely market or command. They allow individuals some freedom regarding what they can and can't do with what's theirs, but government actors reserve the right to restrict the actions of their citizens or even coerce additional actions by force. Freedom, on the other hand, is the absence of necessity, coercion, or restraint in choice or action. However, it's important to distinguish between natural restraints of choice that exist under any economic system and imposed restraints of choice that exist only because government uses force to impose them. For example, a person will die if they go without food and water for too long. This is a natural restraint of choice that has existed since the dawn of time and will continue to exist whether you're living in a country with a market economy or a command economy. On the other hand, there is no natural restraint that prevents a person from starting a business, producing goods and exchanging them with others. But in most states today, men with guns will throw you in prison or kill you if you attempt to do this without first purchasing a license to do so from the government. This is a government-imposed restraint on an otherwise free action. When we say that capitalism is freedom, what we mean is that it is the freedom to do what you want with what belongs to you, absent government coercion. And yes, this is very good. If Professor Teachout wants to criticize capitalism, she'll have to show how the problems that she perceives are the necessary result of people making their own decisions with their own time and resources, and how forcing them to do otherwise will fix these problems.
If you buy into this logic, then any alternative with more role for the public seems oppressive and tyrannical, one where other people make all the decisions for you.
Important note: this nebulous idea we call the public is nothing more than a collection of individuals who all have different needs and desires. When two parties engage in a voluntary transaction, they only do so because they both benefit from the transaction. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made it. Anytime someone uses force to coerce someone else into a transaction in the name of the public, they are necessarily harming the person or group of persons that they are coercing in order to benefit a different person or group of persons. Were this not the case, they wouldn't have had to use force. Thus, there really is no such thing as a public good.
Appealing in theory. In practice, not true.
Because in practice, governments all over the world use force to prevent people from making voluntary decisions. I guarantee that every problem you're about to criticize is brought about by government, not by free individuals exchanging what belonged to them voluntarily.
Our economy isn't about freedom at all, just the opposite. American capitalism today is defined by an overwhelming lack of freedom for the vast majority of people, and incredible dictatorial power for a few people at the very top.
I actually agree, but that's because America does not have capitalism. America has a large, intrusive government that regulates economic matters to death, especially industries that are often believed to be the most essential, like banking and healthcare. I challenge you to name for me one, just one industry today that doesn't have at least one regulatory agency constantly breathing down its neck and increasing its cost of doing business.
That's because we have allowed big corporate monopolies to take over a lot of the work of government and replace public institutions with private for-profit ones.
First, monopolies do not, nor can they exist, without governments using force to stamp out their competition. If you disagree, I'll refer you to economist Thomas DiLorenzo, who in his work, The Myth of Natural Monopoly, examines every industry that has historically been said to be a natural monopoly, and shows that all of these industries maintain their influence only because government continues to force their competition out of the market and/or pass regulations that require citizens to do business with them. Second, why do you say for-profit like it's a dirty term? Do you honestly think government employees are less greedy than private entrepreneurs? The only difference is, the greed of private companies forces them to give the consumer what they want. Otherwise, those companies wouldn't be making any profits. The greed of government forces them to steal more and more money from the taxpayers, whether they're actually providing what the people want or not.
They have gobbled up small and medium-sized businesses so they can set all the terms.
Actually, it's government setting all the terms by way of regulation. When's the last time you saw a private business send its own employees with guns to shut down one of their competitors? On the other hand, when's the last time you saw government agents shut down a business whose competitors suddenly saw a spike in profits? You
hear a lot about the freedom to choose, but what does that freedom really mean? Sure, we can choose between different eyeglass companies until we learn they are all owned by the same company behind the scenes. We can choose between Budweiser, Skoal, or Beck's beer, but they're all owned by the same company too.
You know what else we can choose? Not to buy beer at all if we don't want any. The mere fact that some companies are owned by larger companies doesn't force you to buy anything. When exactly is the last time a beer company broke down your door, held a gun to your head, took your money, and left beer in return, even though you explicitly said you didn't want any beer? On the other hand, is this not exactly what the IRS does if you don't pay your taxes, even if you explicitly state that you don't want the services that government is producing with your money?
And when it comes to work, where most people spend most of their time, people don't have much freedom at all. Despite claims that workers freely enter into a contract to sell their labor, there's no free choice between working and not working.
Yeah. 100,000 years ago, there wasn't any choice between working and not working either. The goods and services we need to survive don't just magically appear without someone doing the work. This will be the case under capitalism, socialism, or any other system you might try to imagine. You can, in fact, choose not to work. You just might not like the fact that the things you need to survive won't just magically appear.
In a country like ours, where 40% of people can't scrape together $400 in an emergency, the reality is that you either work or you starve. You don't have several months to take time off and carefully choose a good employer.
Our ancestors didn't have several months to decide whether they should plant corn or rice, or whether to hunt deer or buffalo. Work or starve is a reality that comes from nature itself. You do have the right to sit around for several months looking for an employer, but sitting around does not create any value, and thus no one will voluntarily pay you to do it.
In order to survive, people submit to working menial, unrewarding jobs for little pay, no security, and bad benefits.
Who exactly are you to decide what pay and benefits are good or bad, or whether or not a certain job is fulfilling or worthwhile? This is something only the individual can decide for himself. Can you honestly give me one example of a worker in America today who started his job because someone held a gun to his head? You can say work or starve all you'd like, But that reality comes from nature itself. It existed long before modern society or before market economies. The sad thing is, workers across the board probably could secure far better wages and benefits were it not for all the additional costs imposed on their employers by government regulation. But nonetheless, there is a limited amount of resources in the economy, which necessarily means not everyone can have everything they want all the time. At least capitalism allows you to pursue the things you want with the things that are available to you. Government, on the other hand, just arbitrarily decides what you're going to get based on the whims of politicians, who tend to put their own needs before the needs of the people.
Once they're on the job, that lack of freedom only gets worse. When we go to work, we check our hard-won rights at the door, and your employers rule over you night and day. Big corporations like Amazon punish workers for speaking out. Many corporations are now spying on workers' political activities. They intrude into people's private lives, monitor their social media, and regulate their breaks.
Oh my gosh! Companies actually care whether their employees are doing what they're getting paid to do and not just sitting around all day. The fact of the matter is, businesses dictate the terms of employment to their employees via contract. This could include restricting what their employees post publicly on social media, inasmuch as posts could affect the employer's ability to do business. If the employee is unwilling to comply with the terms of employment, they are free to seek employment elsewhere or start their own business. And on the point about businesses spying on their employees, it's true that businesses often monitor work computers to make sure that they are being used for work purposes only on the job. However, you know who spies on everyone all the time, regardless of where they're employed? The government.
In poultry plants across the country, workers are penalized for simply using the bathroom, to the point that they wear adult diapers and avoid drinking water so as to keep working. That's not freedom.
Let's suppose this is true, as has been claimed by the likes of Vivian Valdez, a former employee of a poultry company based out of Texas called Sanderson Farms. Reporting to The Guardian in 2018, Valdez stated that she left employment at Sanderson Farms after being repeatedly denied bathroom breaks by her supervisor. You hear that? She didn't like the way that her supervisor was controlling her access to the bathroom, and she quit the job. Now, I'm not saying that this report about the poultry industry is false. Capitalism doesn't guarantee that employers won't be jerks. However, thanks to the fact that employees are in fact free, they can seek employment elsewhere and expose bad business practices to private media outlets who are all too happy to expose these companies publicly. In fact, the same Guardian article notes that the poultry industry has notoriously high turnover rates, despite offering comparatively high wages to other entry-level, low-skilled jobs. That means that people in the poultry industry are regularly quitting the job because they don't like it, even though they can earn more money there than at other entry-level, low-skilled jobs. Do you seriously think that government agencies never deal with bad managers or employees who feel they've been mistreated? Jerks will exist in any society. At least free markets allow you to leave a bad employer if you want to.
And when the boss decides to fire you, there's no due process. Like a feudal lord, he can fire and punish workers at will.
Anyone who's ever been a manager knows this is abjectly false. It might be true if we actually did have a capitalist free market economy, but as of right now, the Fair Labor and Standards Act, Civil Rights Act, and numerous other federal and state laws make employers deathly afraid of firing employees lest they be hit with a wrongful termination suit. Heck, there's a whole federal agency called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission responsible for investigating possible cases of unlawful job discrimination. You might think it's a bad thing that employers could fire their employees for any reason at all, and that it would allow them to terminate good employees for immoral reasons, such as an employee being fired for refusing their boss's sexual advances. But on the flip side, it also protects bad employees from being fired, such as airlines who have been forced to rehire pilots who flew while intoxicated. The fact is, no employer is going to fire an employee who is creating value for the business. If they do, they'll hurt their own business, and such an employee will be picked up by another employer who is willing to make use of their talents. At the end of the day, laws against employment discrimination are far more effective at keeping bad employees from getting fired than they are at protecting good employees from bad employers.
In practice, American workplaces are like private governments, where the freedoms we associate with democracy don't exist. When we clock in, we become subjects, not citizens.
The difference is, you are free to leave your employer at any time, as I already demonstrated with your poultry industry example. Employers who fail to take their employees' needs into account will suffer from high turnover rates, and more than likely be subjected to bad press. The government, on the other hand, maintains its control of you everywhere you go, no matter where you work. If you're complaining that businesses are acting like governments, do you really think the answer is government? Explain that to me.
Without anti-monopoly regulations to restrict their size, or labor unions to contest their power over employees, corporations and their wealthy CEOs have as much power over ordinary people as any government agency, if not more.
This has already been thoroughly debunked in Thomas DiLorenzo's The Myth of Natural Monopoly. No monopoly has ever existed without the help of government regulations forcing their competition out of the market. And as I already demonstrated with your own example of the poultry industry, workers regularly leave jobs because they are unwilling to work with the terms of their employers. It's not that hard.
Despite the lie that our market is free, most industries are dominated by a few massive firms. 2 corporations control office supplies, 5 corporations control food, 2 corporations dominate retail, 4 corporations control home internet, 1 corporation dominates books.
Even so, those corporations don't hold guns to your head, forcing you to buy their products. They do, however, spend millions of dollars every year lobbying government for special privileges that force their competition out of the market. Everyone always loves to talk about how dangerous giant corporations are, all the while ignoring that if these corporations were so dangerous, they wouldn't need to secure the government's help in maintaining control of the market.
Instead of free competition, the status quo is monopoly control. Huge corporations set the terms and manage the economy from their perch at the top of the market, deciding who succeeds and who fails.
No, government does that. These corporations are incapable of passing the regulations that shut down their competition on their own. They pay off politicians to pass those regulations for them. If it's politicians who are accepting bribes from these companies to set up monopolies, do you really think the solution is giving those same politicians more power to control the market?
When Facebook decides to promote a political agenda to benefit itself, who can stop them? When Amazon decides it doesn't like a particular book, that book can vanish from the place most everyone buys books. When Pfizer decides to raise insulin prices ahead of a shareholders meeting, it's done, and people die as a result.
Funny how it is that you can't just start a competing business, especially when it comes to something like manufacturing insulin, or medications, or other healthcare-related issues. The amount of regulations and red tape that prevent competitors from entering these industries are massive. So I'd ask again, why exactly are these monopolies so big without any competition? Is it the natural result of free people making their own decisions with their own time and money? Or does it have something to do with that government that you seem to love so much?
Every day, decisions that affect millions of people are made not by everyone in a democratic manner, but by unelected people who have profits and not the well-being of others in mind.
And if they want to make any profits, they had better have the needs of their consumers in mind. Do you seriously think that government officials are all just morally upright individuals, not at all greedy, caring only about the needs of others? If that's the case, why is it that government officials continue to work with these corporations to keep their monopolies afloat?
That's the problem at the heart of our system. Elected officials are always expressing concern about government intrusion into our private lives. but they're happy to let corporations take advantage of us in ways that would be unconstitutional for any democratic government. The hard truth is that despite what you hear, the modern American economy is not about the freedom to choose. In job markets where you either get a job or you die, in workplaces where the boss is king, and in marketplaces dominated by huge abusive monopolies, you don't have much of a choice at all. I'm Zephyr Teachout, professor of law at Fordham Law School for the Gravel Institute.
So let me get this straight. Big, powerful corporations are paying off government officials so that they pass laws that make these corporations even bigger and more powerful. Therefore, we should give government officials even more power over the marketplace so that they can protect us from these big corporations that they're already working with to make more powerful? Do I understand this correctly? Allow me to quickly summarize the key points of my response to this video. 1. Capitalism is free people voluntarily producing things that belong to them and exchanging them without coercion. 2. Corporations have no power to force you to buy their goods and services. Only government can do that. 3. Professor Teachout complains that large monopolies control most sectors in the economy, but these monopolies only remain immune from competition inasmuch as government regulates their competition out of existence. 4. Although these companies are powerless to prevent competition without the help of government, somehow only the government can save us from these corporations. So tell me, viewer, do you really believe that politicians, unlike private entrepreneurs, are incorruptible, morally good people who have nothing in mind but doing good for their people? And if not, should we really be seeking to solve these problems by giving the government even more power over our lives? Think about it. And that is my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. This video was selected on the basis of a patron request. Reminder that all patrons who pledge $15 a month or more on Patreon or Subscribestar are guaranteed to have their video requests made. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, as well as hit the bell to receive notifications so that you never miss an upload. And if you're a fan of my channel, please consider supporting me on Subscribestar, Bitbacker, or Patreon to receive special rewards. All links can be found in the About section of my website, my2centsvideos.com.